All right. I should be. The internet says I am live now. Yay, Excalidraw. Or not Excalidraw. Diagrams.net picked up my stream. Picked up the fact that I do not want to go blind and to use dark mode. Yeah. So we are going to go over first some commits and wait a little bit for people to come in on live stream. And I guess one personal update is I have a real microphone now instead of the crappy one built into my Logitech headset. My Logitech headset was not large enough for my head apparently, so when I tried adjusting it, it like fell apart. And I used the opportunity to start using my old headphones again and get a real mic, because when I plugged in the cheapo Amazon one I had, it was just like falling off the interface over and over again, and decided it was finally time to get like a real streaming mic. Also, for my day job, it'd be kind of fun to like flex on all the casuals with their like crappy built-in microphones. So I haven't streamed in like a month, so I guess I have a lot of things to go over. Because I haven't been streaming or making content, I've just been going ham. So I added free IPA support, so that's actually a pretty cool dashboard I could show. It will try to implement the health check tool that's bundled into free IPA, and it will also add in a really cool dashboard and tell you how unhealthy your cluster is. You can look in various sources, monitor the amount of healthy checks, the IPA health checks, and all that good stuff. This one's really all log based, but it's nice that you can see like what's going wrong with your cluster, because with most LDAP based systems, they work really, really well, and then they fail catastrophically and you have no idea why for like 2 days. And then eventually you're able to pick up the pieces again. So it'll be nice to be able to be proactive when my free IPA cluster craps itself. Added telegraph instrumentation. I think that was, yeah, free IPA stuff. And then this one is I changed the health endpoint for Grafana. So this was an interesting bug caused if you had automatic sign-in with SSO enabled. So now if you do set up like OIDC, it will not try to, you don't have to explicitly press your SSO provider. It will just automatically try to sign you in via SSO. And what that looks like is if I go to grafana.shiftsystems.net. Sorry, my phone's blowing up. I need to put it on silent really quick. So if I sign out here, it'll actually like immediately sign me back in, because I have it set up to automatically redirect. You can overwrite it if you need to log in locally. If you also need to disable it for a second, because there are only some things a local admin can do. That's just flipping an Ansible variable. Also, hi, Micah. Glad to see you back. So what other things have I changed? Oh, yeah. So what bug that would cause is if you go to / by default, it'll try to redirect you to an SSO provider. And unless you say like 301's healthy, it will freak out and fail. So I was having Trafic say this origin isn't healthy, so I wasn't able to access Grafana. There's an API health endpoint, which just specifies the Grafana version and a couple of other things. And that returns a 200 whether or not you're logged in. So it's a more accurate health check too, especially because it'll tell you if you're connected to the DB. Added health checks. So here are the health checks we added. Basically, this is so Docker knows whether or not the container is healthy. A lot of times people will do this for databases, but they won't do it for web apps, which I find strange. But so now you can actually tell if all of these tools are healthy. Oh, poor Micah. Micah ordered a server rack so he doesn't have to have all of his home lab gear on the floor, and he's just sitting there spamming refresh on when Amazon will get there. He was willing to like drive to the distributor for Amazon near him just so he could get the rack early. Fix traffic path. I believe this was a bug to start working on CrowdSec. That's something I want to revisit now that I have a public-facing ShiftMon deployment. So eventually CrowdSec support's going to get way better and function much better as well. I noticed that I did not do a great job of that the first time around, so I plan on remedying that soon. And then this is just removing a default value out of a dashboard, so it won't try to load Network Manager. It'll just be alphabetical. And then the classic Galaxy version bump where I forget to save a file after I've changed everything else. And we have NUT support now. So NUT is the network UPS tool. And it is a way that you can get metrics from your server, see how healthy it is, and see how much power the actual UPS is using as well. Oh, CrowdSec? You explain it like I'm 5. I'll get to that as soon as I'm done talking about NUT. So NUT is the network UPS tool, and it can show me how long my power supply will last. I couldn't get the watt load, which is weird because TripLight displays that on the unit itself, but it doesn't show in the metrics for some reason. But I can track how charged the battery is, show the thresholds for when it gets scary, and show how utilized the system is over time. I might do some research and see if those thresholds are reasonable. But if it's half used, it'll show yellow, and over 70% used. It's 70% used, it'll show red. I don't have an alert set up for that yet, but yeah. You can also monitor whether or not the voltage is healthy too, so you can monitor like brownout conditions and things like that. This is another one of those things where you can use pretty charts to explain stuff to your boss, where you could show that like, hey, notice that the output voltage is healthy and the input voltage is absolute garbage. And because of that, we're saving this many thousands of dollars due to downtime and equipment not blowing up. So yeah. And the reason why I didn't put charts on here is because I didn't want my American to show and have all the 240 or 220 people yell at me that Americans are weird and we don't do voltage right. Oh yeah. New mic. I haven't tested it with like my wife and chat moderator typing. So we'll work on that. So Micah was asking what the heck is CrowdSec, and CrowdSec is like fail to band with a hive mind is the short version of it. Wait. Not that one. I forgot they have issues getting the right domain. So what CrowdSec does is it will analyze logs on a system and then use like grok patterns and stuff like that to detect bad behavior. So if you have a WordPress site, it will detect if like somebody tries to log into WP admin 5 times and then block that IP address. And that's kind of where tools like fail to ban will stop. Or SSH brute forcing, where somebody tries to log in with like admin or root multiple times. It will log that, hey, this person has failed this many times to log in, and then ban their IP address for about 4 hours. The And at that point, it matches fail to ban. So why is it better than fail to ban? One is fail to ban, I believe, is written in Python, and CrowdSec is written in Go. And Golang is usually much more performant than Python. The other thing is CrowdSec will monitor. They have a consensus mechanism to decide if an IP address is just absolute garbage globally. So if you log this IP address that's doing bad stuff and 3 other people do, and it's showing throughout your fleet, then it will inform CrowdSec, and they have some very fancy consensus mechanisms to be like, okay, this is a known bad IP address. It's not in our whitelist for things that we know are known good, and add it to the list. And then you can consume that list. And the way they fund this project is if you give them data. So if you give them data, they'll let you use the service for free. They have a free and paid tier. And then if you don't want to contribute data and just consume their feeds in like a proprietary firewall or something, you can do that. It's available for Windows, Linux, FreeBSD, and there is a plugin for OpenSense, which is super cool. I don't want to show that stuff on a live stream because I'm going to show like identifiable information about where I live or like secrets or stuff like that. So I'm more than happy to answer questions about CrowdSec, but I don't want to like demo it on stream unless I can like heavily censor what's going on. Where was I? So we have nut support, hooray. We updated docs, and I forgot to bump the Galaxy version as is tradition. Just so that way people know how to enable nut support. It's basically controlled through an inventory variable. And the reason why I can't just do is SmartD running is that nut can also shut down servers as well. And there's a user system for nut. So I can't just rely on being able to scrape like a socket or a file or something like that. So basically say nut enable true, and then define the network settings for nut. Yeah, nut's a super cool tool. I might coordinate it to do shutdowns and do an example alert for like, hey, your UPS is being overutilized, or hey, your UPS is draining battery. Yeah, there'd be a couple of other cool metrics like finding a way to calculate the wattage, but without it reporting the how the capacity of the system, it's harder to do those things like a watt calculation and stuff like that. So it'd be really cool if those metrics were exposed, but oh well, good enough for now. Galaxy bump. Remove deprecated options. This is just like a cleanup thing, so it doesn't break when Telegraph 2.0 comes out. So cleaned up some docs where I pointed to the metrics QLL language instead of the missing time series in Prometheus, since we rely on the lag function in Victoria metrics. So I just updated the reference. User secrets. So, shift watch config. I'll get into that later. And then Galaxy bump. This is actually what I updated. Basically, there are some options that do the same thing that got renamed in a version of Telegraph. And so yeah, field drop changed to field exclude, field pass changed to field include. I'm not entirely sure why they did it, but I didn't want things to break in version 2.0, so that way users could just upgrade mindlessly and things just work, because that's how I think the world should work, and I want to share that experience with everybody. And then change some Docker options. The dashboards should behave the same, but it's using defaults that won't break in 2.0. There was one interesting default set to yes value, so that was weird. So I'm still getting like the you're using deprecated options thing, but it's just a default. So instead of having to set it and then unset it later, I'm just ignoring it for now. More field include, field exclude. So what the heck is this? So ShiftWatch. ShiftWatch is a service that I'm offering, but I'm also publishing how to host your own if you so choose, all open source. So this is actually how I set it up. So ShiftWatch is basically a way to monitor your on-prem monitoring. Cloud monitoring, one of the nice things about it is it's somebody else's problem, and they're usually doing things different enough from you that if your systems are down, their systems are up and they can alert you about it. But if you do on-prem monitoring, there's a high likelihood if you write a bug with automation, break a router, something like that, your hosting provider goes down, you could lose data and not know about it because the monitoring system can't notify you about that. So ShiftWatch is a way where you deploy a second ShiftMon server, point it at your first ShiftMon server, and then set up a second ShiftMon server, put it somewhere else, use a different alerting endpoint, diversify it as much as you can, and then point it at your first ShiftMon server so that way it can monitor it for you. And if that sounds like too much of a pain in the butt, Shift Systems will host it for you. We have information on our website, which we will link in the stuff down below. So yeah. Because running on-prem monitoring is super cool, but the downside of most cloud monitoring systems is the billing is in a format that most, even like I'm pretty good with observability stuff, I like to think, but understanding Grafana Cloud billing super confusing. And the metrics that they bill on are different than metrics, like their billing scales differently than I scale. So like I think of how many hosts are in a service or how big of a cluster do I need to host something, and they scale based on the number of time series. And mapping that is super difficult because like a different cluster might have a different set of pods, which lead to a different amount of metrics. So keeping those things in check keeping that kind of all together is super messy and super hard to get like budget for, because you can't, or I shouldn't say you can't, it is extremely difficult to get a good estimation. Whereas on-prem, you say, this is the budget we have, this is how big of a deployment we can manage, and if the server falls over, we've accepted that risk. In my talk itself, I explained it. If you use cloud-based monitoring, you have the risk of your credit card maxing out and declining. If you run on-prem, you have the risk of the server falling over. So it's choosing your battles. One thing I still remember from engineering school is no solutions, only trade-offs, which has been pretty accurate in my career and life sometimes so far. That's just a merge. I think that's... small bug with the container where the container would still run, but it wouldn't mount a volume for CrowdSec directly. So more accurate CrowdSec data should show up, because the way CrowdSec works is that it either consumes syslog or it reads log files. So I needed to find a way where I can mount that inside of the container for now. I would eventually like to move Trafic over to syslog for logging, but that's a bit of a tricky thing. Because then I have to have a container read the local syslog back to it, and I'm not sure how that works. But it'd be really nice not to have like a 50 gig access log sitting on your server for no reason. So yeah, that's everything that's been updated. And the other thing I wanted to do on stream tonight was work on a separate video for setting up Woodpecker CI. So I'm going to do filming. If you have criticism or questions, I'll answer it between takes. But if I'm not being very responsive to chat, that's why. I'll be looking at my script instead of chat. So actually, before that, sorry, squirrel moment, I wanted to do explaining how far services scale thing. I've noticed it come up with a bunch of stuff recently, and it's kind of relevant to why I chose Woodpecker CI, is its ability to scale up and down and how far it can go. I've noticed that that there are certain tools that like they're really good at a large scale, but they're super difficult to operate at a low scale. And then there's tools, I guess I can include ShiftMon in this, where they scale up to a certain point and then they're not great anymore. So I'm going to try to draw this out in diagrams.io. If you have feedback during this, please let me know. So I'm going to have text here. That is my home lab. I guess if you make the box bigger and don't make the font bigger, nothing changes. I think that's big enough. So here we're going to have the home lab. And then here we're going to have, is it SMB Enterprise. I'll fix the fonts in a second. Literally Google. I think that's a good point to scale. I could quickly boop and 24. And then we're going to do a line that goes from meow to here. And I think you can color lines. Can I make this some? Yeah. So we have here, and then we're going to put AWX woodpecker and then semaphore. Then I have to make the fonts big again. Oh, should I leave the line slightly crooked just to troll Shelby? All right. So then we're going to have 3 more. I think I should be able to put these on a line live on video. We'll see how that goes. And yes, this is a T3 knockoff. That line, is that line straight? Since you're a stakeholder, I'll listen to you. Okay, cool. I think I can make this line thicker because that does not look very legible. There, that's positioned well. Let's do a 6-point line. Yes, this is much better. Okay. So these are, how well spaced out are these? Actually, SMB should be closer to home lab because, to be honest, my home lab's better, like, has more redundancy and is better than a lot of SMBs I've walked into. And then enterprise and then literally Google. I think that's a pretty well spaced out line. The fact that I can't draw a straight line does in fact reinforce that I do not do the design work for shift systems. So yeah. So I think I have this prepped. I'm just going to practice draw. Or I guess I could just copy the line. Yeah, and then I can tweak the line so it goes from like here to here. And then put like AWX. Yeah, okay. Cool. Yay, Micah got his rack. I think he's probably, hopefully I can be entertaining background noise because I know you're already ripping into the box right now. Also, Micah, send me your Twitch URL. So we'll map these tools. I have my script pulled up, and we're going to talk about why I use the tools that I use. So I'm going to hit start record, and yeah, somebody yell at me if there's issues with the stream. So, hey everybody, my name is Matthias Palmersheim, and today I wanted to talk to you about how to set up a woodpecker container to deploy your AWX. That's a bad take. All right, let's try this again. Hey everybody, my name is Matthias Palmersheim with Shift Systems, and today I'm going to go over how to set up your own container for running Ansible jobs in Woodpecker CI. But before I get into the nitty gritty of actually how to do it, I want to explain the why. So first of all, it's very common, especially in larger companies, to use AWX to run Ansible jobs on a schedule or on a manual basis. And the issue with that is AWX is really big. So the graph I have up here is going to show like the scale of your deployment is going to be this line. On the left, we have home labs and small to medium businesses. I'm not sure if these two should be switched around because I've seen home labs that are way more resilient and complex than most small to medium sized businesses. Over here, we have enterprise where you're seeing you have like a team of 8 people adminning systems, and then you have literally Google, where you're running one of the world's largest cloud providers, and you need to be able to manage them at scale. So where AWX fits to me is, and this arrow, the next arrows are going to be like where these tools fit super well. So now we're going to shrink this down to like here and here. So AWX to me fits in really well here. The reason for that is it's required to, or in order to run officially, it only supports Kubernetes. So you have to already have a Kubernetes cluster set up or pay for something like AKS, which can be cost prohibitive. And then for smaller deployments, you have things like Ansible Semaphore, which kind of cover the other side of the spectrum here, where it kind of starts over at home lab, and then kind of in like smaller enterprises, you can run it as well. I actually used to use Ansible Semaphore, but for a couple of reasons I'll explain in a minute, I switched to Woodpecker. So Woodpecker is not in the same class of tool, but it can be used to solve a similar problem to Semaphore and AWX, which is give me a pretty GUI so I don't have to remember the 10 command line flags to run this Ansible job. And the neat thing about Woodpecker is that it scales pretty much all the way up to being like literally Google. You can run it in a pretty sizable enterprise, I would think. The lack of being able to yell at somebody when it breaks is probably the biggest inhibitor. It's not a technical limitation. It's a governance limitation where, as far as I know, there's not somebody you could throw a pile of money at and blame when your CI system is down. So that's why I chose Woodpecker, is that it seems like it would apply either to my very small modest home lab all the way up to a large enterprise. Whereas tools like AWX have a much higher barrier to entry and Semaphore has a lower ceiling. Woodpecker kind of seems like it could cover a wide variety of use cases. The other thing is the Semaphore community wasn't nearly as active as the Woodpecker CI community is. So it feels nice to be able to go into a matrix room and interact with people. I've actually gotten really good help from the maintainers in their matrix community. So they're in the same places I'm already interacting, which is really nice. The other nice thing is with AWX and Semaphore, a lot of the job configuration happens in a GUI. So you can't like version control it, or as with CI pipelines, most of them are configured in plain text YAML files. And the other nice thing about that is AWX and Semaphore, they just run Ansible playbooks. You can't run other sorts of jobs. You can coerce like Semaphore and AWX to be deployment tools, but it can be much trickier. AWX, building your own container is kind of weird. You can't run any arbitrary container from an AWX job. You have to use an execution environment, which is a weird container based on Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8, I believe. So if you need newer dependencies, you're going to have to deal with that. And you're going to have to figure out how to shove those things into your own custom container, which can be super interesting for things like Kix, where it's not officially packaged that way. Whereas with Woodpecker, everything runs in containers without so it doesn't leave random artifacts or side effects behind, but you can also run things like Kix that are packaged primarily as Docker containers. So that was another nice thing too. Another thing is that AWX and Semaphore are separate tools. So if a business doesn't already have them set up, you have to sell the business on why should we spend admin time or pay Red Hat for Tower to figure out how to do or to run Ansible jobs. Whereas most businesses either have a CI tool or their developers really should be using continuous integration so they can have an audit trail of who deployed to prod on a Friday. So when it breaks, they can get yelled at. So yeah. So there's a bajillion different CI tools out there. Why did I choose Woodpecker? It has a really good UX. So there's some CI tools where everything's command line driven to kick off jobs and stuff. Whereas to kick off a job inside of AWX, I can do things like this. Just add a variable and kick off a job. Most importantly though, if I do kick off a job, I get this really nice status indicator. It's a cute little woodpecker. Makes me happy. Just seeing it peck away at a job. I just think that's super cool. The other nice thing is there are things that aren't Ansible that I want to run. Like I said earlier, there's a matrix notification plugin, and there is an Ansible plugin if you don't want to build your own container. The other thing is it's open source, like it's actually open source. So Woodpecker was forked from Drone CI after they switched to an open core model where basically things that make it scale were put behind a paywall. And it's also like, hey, if you have a big enough, like if your company makes X amount of dollars, you have to pay for it, which isn't open source by definition. The OSI license like specifically calls that out. And GitLab's a really good tool for this, but it's coupled tightly to a forge. So if you're using like GitHub or God forbid anything made by Atlassian, you're going to have to figure that integration out, which is possible, but it's still tied to a forge. And GitLab's also, as far as the home lab scale is concerned, it's pretty difficult to operate and requires a significant chunk of resources. We can actually go into my Grafana dashboards and see that it's for running Gitty for the code or for the code forge and then Woodpecker CI and the runner, it's using 37% of disk usage. 37% memory usage on 4 gigs. So that's plenty of free memory. Whereas with GitLab, it was like 6 megs of RAM running. The other thing that kind of stunk was that to configure GitLab, it was like the 6,000 line. I forget if it's Puppet or Chef, but this giant chunky automation playbook you have to interface with, and it just wasn't a great time when it did break. It does have some enterprise features that Giddy plus Woodpecker doesn't have, but in my home lab, I don't need. Kind of going back to the diagram that we have for scaling. Giddy can scale all the way down to the home lab and go pretty far up into the enterprise, but the like barrier to entry for GitLab to me kind of starts somewhere in between SMB and enterprise. So it's nice to have that scaled down experience as well. So that's pretty much the why I chose to do this. How the heck do I do it? Oh, one thing I did forget was the plugins. So there is a really good Ansible plugin for Drone CI that served me well for a while until I made a fatal mistake and decided that my head scale exit node should be my DNS server. And then that caused all sorts of fun networking issues, which leads to jobs like this, where I sit there and wait for 10 minutes for DNS and networking issues to occur. And then the server doesn't end up deploying correctly and I rage quit. The other downside is when it did work, it would take minutes. So sometimes it would take minutes and fail, which is super frustrating. Like I'm just sitting here for 5 minutes and then it just dies, which that's really annoying. When it would succeed, it would take about, where is it? When a job would succeed, it would take a decent amount of time, north of like 10 minutes. Now I can redeploy all of ShiftMon in 3.5. So in the time it was taking to download Galaxy dependencies, I can deploy this out to my home lab. So that was one reason. The other reason is control of the environment. So the plugin uses, I believe, Alpine Linux, and it has to have some other stuff in there in order to work as a drone plugin. I'm going to have to do a second take. The dog has the zoomies. Do you have zoomies? Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Miku, you have zoomies. Sorry about that. Miku has zoomies. I think I might cut the Y part off and just go over the how. Okay, sorry. Dog zoomies aside. I also need to pull up the job where it showed everything. But yeah. I don't think I'm getting any filming done tonight. I think Miku zoomies have won. Also, Micah, if you haven't heard of rack studs, you should definitely grab some. I don't think I'm ever going to have a successful YouTube career doing videos just because Miku's going to come in and get the zoomies. Oh my God. Are you quite finished, ma'am? Ma'am. I think she's almost tuckered herself out. I'm going to have a chapter of this stream that's like half the stream and it's just Miku has zoomies. I also need to like make sure all the paperwork's off the ground so I can like turn the camera toward her. Yeah, Miku, you're a good girl. I think she's tuckered out now. I can try to record again. I think I have a good take for everything up to like when I started showing the woodpecker UI. So I might actually try my hand at editing. I don't know. Kind of verbose. Do you think that first take is salvageable, or should I go again? Answer in chat. I think I also have like a whole bunch of crap open on my desktop too. I mean, you might be the one who edits it. I'm sorry. So you think I should do another take, which is fair. I think I could do that too. I have the hard drive space for it, so why not? And plus there's some things. I'll have this dashboard prepped. I need the rage quit, and then I need like, is it 487? That was just a bug that I don't want to talk about. That was a I can't type. Perfect. Yeah, that's like a 10-minute run. Given it's a little cheated, because this is running on Hetzner, which is a pretty cheap VPS provider and not like a RAID 10 NVMe array like I have downstairs. But to me, it's still pretty accurate. Plus my flow's off. Okay. This is a good warm-up take. So let's go again, and hopefully Miku won't interrupt. And if she does, I hope it's super cute and wholesome. All right, let's do this thing. Hey everybody, my name is Matthias Palmersheim with Shift Systems, and today I'm going to explain why and how to run your Woodpecker CI jobs using AWX. Killed it. I feel like watching people film is a lot like watching speedrun streams where like there's a whole bunch of insta fails and then you have to reset. But yeah. Hey everybody, my name is Matthias Palmersheim from Shift Systems, and today I would like to go over how to run a Woodpecker CI job with Ansible, and then cringe. So the intro should be, hi, my name is Tiny with Shift Systems, and today I would like to, and I'm going to go over why I deploy my Ansible jobs with Woodpecker CI and how to do it. I think that's better. Hey everybody, it's Tiny with Shift Systems, and today I wanted to go over how to run an Ansible job with Woodpecker CI, and then why I chose to do that in the first place. So I think I'm going to start off with the why here. And the reason why I chose Woodpecker is how well it can scale. Not only how well it can scale up, which is something that's focused on, especially in like the cloud native space, but how far it can scale down as well. So the most common tool used for running Ansible jobs is AWX. And AWX is a really solid tool. It can scale up to like, I'm a Fortune 500 company. I'm going to restart the screen with literally Google. Dollar company. And stop recording. Hyperscaler. All right. Let's give this another go. Hi, my name is Tiny with Shift Systems, and today I would like to go over how to deploy a Ansible playbook using Woodpecker CI. I could do a better start than that. I can't screw up in like the first 20 seconds. Hey everybody, my name's Tiny with Shift Systems, and today I want to go over how to deploy an Ansible playbook using Woodpecker CI and why I chose Woodpecker CI instead of a more conventional tool to do this. Starting with the why not use AWX? AWX is a really powerful tool developed by Red Hat for running Ansible jobs and only Ansible jobs. So that's one kind of ding against it, is if you want to do like code quality scans, you need to set up another tool. You need to make sure you're not putting secrets in version control. That can't be done through AWX. The other thing is how far it or where it scales. So there's a lot of talk about scaling up and hyperscaling and stuff like that. And AWX can do that. It runs in Kubernetes, so it can scale it pretty elastically. But the downside is it runs in Kubernetes, which means if you're a home lab or a small to medium sized business, you might not have a Kubernetes cluster available. So it only starts working where it really makes sense to you either have a Kubernetes cluster for other applications that you can deploy AWX to, or you can justify the like time and money it takes to set up a Kubernetes cluster. Then on the other end of the spectrum, there's Ansible Semaphore, which is a tool. It's a tool I've used before. It's great. It works. But it doesn't scale up very far. So there's not great documentation for running it inside of Kubernetes. The environments aren't as customizable if you need to customize like the OS that Ansible is running on, because you need Python dependencies or like a specific version of Python. Can't handle that really well, where AWX has execution environments to do that. And then there's Woodpecker CI. Now, Woodpecker CI isn't a dedicated Ansible tool like Semaphore or AWX, but it can scale down really far to running in a home lab, and it can scale up to the point where pretty much everybody who doesn't need a support contract can run it. Since Woodpecker is a community project, there's not some corporation you could call it for support and then blame them when your CI jobs fail, which some companies really like. So if your enterprise is cool with that for your CI tool, it'll work, but it doesn't necessarily go all the way up to like hyperscaler level as far as I've seen. So that's why I want to use Woodpecker, is that it's something I could take into the workplace and run in my home lab, whereas AWX, it makes sense to use at work, not in the home lab. Semaphore, that. The reason why I chose Woodpecker though over the bajillion CI tools out there is is that it had a plugin for matrix notification and could take advantage of the Drone CI plugin ecosystem. Woodpecker was forked from Drone CI after they decided to go open core instead of open source. So if your company makes over X amount of dollars or you need certain plugins, then you have to pay for Woodpecker or for Drone. But Woodpecker CI, you don't have to pay for. It's completely open source. It's Apache 2. You should donate to them. You should support them, but it's nice that that's not coerced. Woodpecker CI also has a really good UI. It's has bright, shiny colors so you can tell whether or not a job succeeded or failed. And one of my personal favorite features is there's a cute little woodpecker that shows up when you start a job. So if I run this with build true, it'll actually build the container. Again, has really, it's an aesthetically pleasing UI, but it's also useful. I can see which steps I've completed, which steps are in progress, and the cute little woodpecker pecks when your job's running. It's really cool. And then going back to the scaling aspect, this is my Giddy server. And as you can see, even with the job running, it's not using very many resources. It's 2 CPUs, 4 gigs of RAM, and there's some IO weight issues, but otherwise it's a great tool that scales down really well, and you can run it in Kubernetes to elastic scale. So having that scalability is really nice too. And then the other reason, I killed the take. I think I can cut from there though. You got this. Take a break. Let it cook. Let's see what chat says. That's a good point. Should I use my real name? So like, I'm not really doxing myself because I have a business and it's like listed that I'm the owner, and I've given talks itself with my real name before. So I don't think it's a big deal. So I guess I have to reshoot that take. Yeah, I'm literally on the website. So I think I'm going to try to split it up into why use woodpecker and then the how section, just so that way I like can fail better. And then splicing it together and making it 2 videos is pretty easy. Want to make money, use a real name. Yeah. Thanks for the feedback, by the way. You guys are making the content better while I make it, which is super cool. But the hacker points, the elite hacksaw points. I like money. Not gonna lie. I enjoy me some stonks. All right. Hey everybody, my name is Matthias Palmersheim with Shift Systems, and today I should have the woodpecker stuff showing with like a running job. I think that'd be really cool. Hey everybody, my name is Matthias Palmersheim with Shift Systems, and today I want to talk about why I run my Ansible jobs inside of Woodpecker CI. There's a ton of different ways to do it, but why choose this very scalable tool with a cute little woodpecker that pecks? And I would like to explain this with a chart. So there's various scales at which software can run, and there's various tools that fit inside of those scales. So the most common tool for running AWX jobs through a web GUI or on a schedule is AWX. AWX is a really good tool, but the problem is that it only really makes sense if you have a if you're comfortable deploying things inside of Kubernetes and you can justify the resources that it has. So AWX, to me, it doesn't scale down very well, and it usually this top arrow is what scale you're at, and then the arrows for the subsequent tools are where, to me, they make the most sense and run the best. So AWX, to me, once you start running into like a medium-sized business or an enterprise, it starts to make sense, all the way up to a hyperscaler. And then the other tool that's gaining some popularity now is Ansible Semaphore. I actually used to run all my playbooks out of Ansible Semaphore, but it doesn't scale up to the enterprise. The Kubernetes documentation isn't super great. It does have enterprise authentication, but there's no way to have a pre-bundled environment running in it. So if you have a lot of custom requirements, you need Python SDKs and stuff like that, you're going to spend a lot of time waiting around for dependencies to install when you're running your jobs. Whereas AWX has an execution environment. It works. It's an Enterprise Linux 8 container that you build using Red Hat tooling, and you can DNF install packages, add in your Python requirements. So then at runtime, you just need to pull the latest image. You don't have to wait for Galaxy to install every time. And then there's Woodpecker. Woodpecker isn't a dedicated Ansible tool, but to me, it fits in a really nice space where it can scale down all the way to my modest home lab, all the way up into like enterprises. The biggest issue is that it's a community-based project, and sometimes businesses demand having support in a vendor that they can blame when things go wrong. And just to show how well it scales down, my Gitty CodeForge and my Woodpecker CI server are running here, and it's not using more than a couple of gigs of RAM. So it scales up, or it can scale up to having Kubernetes and dynamic workers, or you can just set up a Docker Compose file with one worker and a server, and it works just fine. So the other reasons why I would choose Woodpecker over other CI tools is, again, it scales down really well. It has a really great user interface, has a cute little woodpecker. It has a really rich plugin ecosystem. So it was originally forked from Drone CI, so it could use all of those plugins still, but it's actually open source no matter what scale you run at it. Whereas Drone is source available. And if you are a business of a certain size or you need certain features, you do need to pay, or you do need to use a paid for proprietary version of Drone. And the reason why I wouldn't use other CI tools is they were missing like a user experience, or really good open source stuff like GitLab is a much more difficult to run and requires more resources. So I'm using like a couple of gigs of RAM and 2 CPU cores, and it mostly works. When I was running GitLab just for like personal issues and just mirroring some repos, it was using 6 gigs of RAM, and I had to edit this chef playbook or the chef stuff whenever I needed to update settings. So it was very difficult to operate. Whereas using Gitty plus Woodpecker, you just have the one ini file for Gitty and compose options for Woodpecker CI. So there's this really good Ansible plugin for Drone, and I just talked about how much I like using the Drone plugins inside of Woodpecker. Why not use this one? And the first option, or the first reason, is this. I used to use it. It served me well for a while. And then I made a network mistake and decided that my head-scale exit node should be on my DNS server. And that caused a whole bunch of performance issues and caused things to fail. So I would have jobs that would take forever to run. This job took 10 minutes to run, and the first like 5 minutes of it, or the first 280 seconds of it, were just pulling in dependencies. So if I just needed to redeploy something, like override a manual change or something like that, I'm waiting 10 minutes for it to deploy. And it was very variable too, so I couldn't rely on it. And the reason for that is that it was reaching out to Ansible Galaxy every time and building the environment up. Whereas if I just had my own container, it would only have to do a pull when there was an update, and then it could just start running right away. So I went from having errors like this where it would fail, I would rage quit because it was taking too long or take forever to run. I end up with jobs that complete really quickly. Running the ShiftMon role took 3 minutes to do, which is super nice. And the other nice thing is I could build the environment and run it from the same place. So now we're going to go into how do we do this? So to start off, we are going to need to set up a Docker file. A Docker file is how a container gets built up. You usually want to start with the base image. I chose to use Fedora 39 because that's the environment I'm comfortable with, and I want this to mimic the environment I'm running in. And here I'm adding in a requirements.yaml file, which is a file that says, hey, please install these dependents, or it's a list of collections and Ansible content that you want to install into your Ansible environment. I'm also configuring Ansible a little bit, and we can review those options later. Then I'm DNF installing everything I need to use pip to download the latest version of Ansible. And I have Figlet in there so I can make it really obvious I can make it really obvious that I'm trying to print out something. So I can shout out essentially via text that, hey, this is the Galaxy dependencies you're running. Please look at me. Then we're going to use pip to set up Ansible. And then we're going to use Ansible Galaxy to install everything and use some verbosity so that way we can troubleshoot when things go wrong. And for a requirements file, for running ShiftMon, we need this and a few other dependencies as well. And then for roles, we're going to need Gearling Guide Docker, which is the role if you are using Docker with ShiftMon, how Docker will get installed onto the system. Then the Ansible CFG. We want to force color. I really enjoy having colored output, so I can get my attention drawn to big red scary text when things go wrong, and Node I can just scroll past. It's green, it's green, it's green, it's green, whatever. We don't want to have interactive input, and we want some slightly longer timeouts in case we're running into like high IO weight. And then just some general like color stuff. So that's how the environment's set up. But how do we get Woodpecker to do this stuff? So for Woodpecker CI, you either have one .woodpecker.yaml file, or you can have a .woodpecker folder and a bunch of YAML files in here to build the container. So here we're just telling Git to not check SSL certificates. The reason for that in my environment is I like to use free IPA certificates sometimes, and containers don't recognize it. So it's easier to ignore verification. However, in an internal secure environment, you should figure out how to make your internal CA work or use Let's Encrypt. And then we are going to use the Docker BuildX plugin, which is Woodpecker's fork of the drone Docker build plugin. We're going to make sure we're using the latest image. This actually bit me when running the Ansible job, is I didn't know about this option. So it was running an old version of the container, because if the worker can see a version of the container and unless pull is set to true, it will just use the available version. It's a time optimization thing. And then since we're using Docker commands, we need to pass the Docker socket into the system. And then we need a registry password, so that way we can sign into our code registry and publish the container once it's built. Because because Woodpecker jobs run inside of a container and they're destroyed afterwards, you need to find a way to publish artifacts or any reports that would run in a CI job. And since this is a Docker container, we publish it to a registry. So we list our registry here. We need to mention that this is a privilege pipeline because it needs to interact with the Docker socket that requires a higher level of privilege. The registry and the repo it's in, where the Docker file is, which architectures to use, and then how the heck do we log into the registry. Same thing for GitLab, just different secrets in different locations. So that's how we build the container. And then when we need to run the container for publishing ShiftWatch, we can go into how to do that separately, or what all these secrets are another time. But we are going to pull the image that we published in the previous step. Then we're going to echo out our SSH private key to a local file, so that way Ansible can understand where the key file is. We're going to make sure the permissions are right on the key file, because SSH gets really angry if you have loose permissions on a file. And then we're going to run Ansible playbook with the correct user, the correct inventory, the correct limit. We're going to point to this private key here and then specify the playbook. And you're noticing things like the ShiftMon.yaml file that aren't defined formally anywhere or defined in the container. And that's because the ShiftMon file lives inside of this repo. When you run in Woodpecker and most CI pipelines, it will clone the repo into the worker environment for you. And so what the ShiftMon.yaml file looks like is it has all the it has all the URL locations. If we need to pass in a secret, we can use the Woodpecker secret store. And when a job is allowed to use those secrets, they're passed in as environment variables. So we can look up the environment variables and then set all the secrets we need. And then we run the playbooks required to run ShiftMon. So that's the structure of everything. And there is some complexity to this, but there's also some complexity to the alternative tools. It's just, do you want to deal with it inside of a Git repository where it's versioned, and along with being versioned, it works similar to other CI jobs, or do you want it to be its own dedicated tool that is easier for users to go through and custom make their own jobs? There's no objectively right or wrong answer. It just kind of depends on what your team is comfortable with. So when we need to run that job, what we're going to do is we're going to run the pipeline. Actually, you missed a step. You'll notice inside of these config files, there's a when statement. So you can specify only run when this variable is set to true in the case of the build flag, because the build step takes like 6 or 7 minutes between building and publishing to 2 separate registries. So you don't want to run that every time. And then the ShiftMon thing, the ShiftMon job only runs when ShiftMon's defined. So if I wanted to both build and run it, I'd set the build variable to true. And then I would set the role name to ShiftMon. Then we fire off our pipeline. Then when it's done, we are going to have a lovely little output. I'm trying to find a freaking one here. So here's the pipeline where it built successfully. We can see the full output of what happened when the container built. So if it failed, we can find out why, troubleshoot it, and do better next time. And then inside of the welcome, we have Figlet saying, hey, this is what the Galaxy or the Ansible environment looks like. So, and there's a distinct break between the collections and the roles. So I've been Matthias Palmersheim. This is how I deploy ShiftMon using Woodpecker and Ansible, and it's been great talking to you. Butchered it at the end. That was super cringe. I like died inside when I said that out loud. Also, it was good chatting with you, Micah. Yeah, I also do not know how to feed my family with Fleet Hacksaw stuff. I don't know what I should do for an outro. I need to figure that out. Like, who the heck am I? I'm just some internet bozo most of the time. I've been, Jesus. That's sounding like him gonna go off stream and like disappear to the ethereal plane or something like that. Yeah, I'm Matthias Palmer. Like, what should it be? I'm Matthias Palmersheim with Shift Systems, and that's it. Or check me out on GitLab. All the links in the doobly-doo. Have a nice day. I don't know. That's tricky. Yeah. I've been Matthias Palmersheim. This is how I deploy my Ansible jobs using Woodpecker CI. And thanks for watching. And if you need to, oh, that's where I should put the call to action or the plug for ShiftMon and ShiftWatch. So it should be something like, hi, I'm Matthias Palmersheim. This is how I deploy Ansible jobs with Woodpecker CI. If you need help doing similar automation stuff or help with your observability, our contact links are in the doobly-doo below. And have a great day. In the description. But yeah, not doobly-doo. I think I could record that. And then splice it all together. I'm Matthias Palmersheim. This is how I deploy my Ansible jobs using Woodpecker CI. If you need help doing similar automation things or help with your observability, our contact information is in the description below. And have a great day. You laughed. I think the laugh's going to get picked up by the mic. I have to record it one more time. Okay. I'm Matthias Palmerschein. I've been Matthias Palmerschein. This is how I deploy my Ansible jobs with Woodpecker CI. If you need help with your automation or deploying ShiftMon, our contact information is in the description below, and have a great day. I think I can do a little better. Last try. That's like adequate. Hi, I'm Matthias Palmerschein with Shift Systems, and if you need help deploying your automation, or you need forgot stuff. It's okay. I got this. I'm Matthias Palmerschein. This is how I deploy my Ansible automation with Woodpecker CI. And if you need help with your automation or observability, find our contact information in the description below, and we're more than happy to help. Have a great day. I think that's as good as I'm going to get it for now. I need to work on that like off stream and figure out like a formalized intro and stuff. But do better every time. My attitude is definitely like keep trying, failing, and doing better, and that having that tight iteration loop between like working on different software teams and jiu-jitsu is definitely a big one where like you always like fail and you have to do better next time. Like you don't what's the quip? You don't win or you don't lose in jiu-jitsu, you either win or you learn. So like failures are just really learning opportunities. They just are expensive sometimes and like expensive in terms of not just money, but yeah. I don't have anything else to stream. Again, if you want to contact us with help for automation or any observability stuff or buying ShiftWatch, our contact information will be in the description, and it's been great streaming for you.